I will call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging we are in Treaty 1 territory in a traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Neil Harden. I'm chairing today's panel. With me is Cynthia Stevens to my immediate left and Maurice Terrian to my far left. The assessor today is Rob Lucky and the recording secretary is Katie Sutherland. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we'll limit discussion to those matters. The statements that the applicants or assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. We advise that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it in the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have returned, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. So, Katie, can you do the swearing in?
Robert Allen Lucky.
Do you swear that the evidence you represent is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Say.
Thank you. Please state your name.
Rodney Default.
Do you affirm that the evidence that you represent is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, the first property on the agenda today is 21 Roslyn Road, and the matter is assessed value, so you can proceed.
21 Roslyn Road is roll number 120-324-38000. We have a 1979 12-story, excuse me, 112 suites, Roslyn Road on the river overlooking legislative grounds. Property. As I said, the building was built in 1979. We have our model has 12 one-bedrooms, 88 two-bedrooms, and 12 three-bedrooms. The owner did the return and put down that there's 100 two-bedrooms and 12 three-bedrooms, so we'll have to have a look at that, maybe correct it. Our model overall income, which includes rent, parking, laundry, etc., is $1,380.39. Model vacancy of 1.8% and expense ratio of 46.52%. So our net operating income is $974,325, and we have a capitalization rate of 5%. That's all I have to say. Ask that you maintain the assessment.
Okay, questions?
Your valuation on page, again there. Where's that valuation?
3?
3, yes. Was this all done by the model?
It is, I believe.
And you've included the statements in here? Did you have a chance to review and compare them to your model?
I reviewed the statements, yes.
Second, what I did ask, did you review them and consider any adjustments to your valuation?
The reported income is lower than our model, and the expenses differ. But when I looked at the expenses, there was quite a few items that looked like they could have been capital, and the repair and maintenance per unit was fairly high, in my opinion. So the actual income is lower, but the actual expenses, I think, would be quite a bit lower than ours as well.
And what does your model have for repair and maintenance expenses?
We don't have it broken out in our model.
Okay, well, I'm just kind of wondering how you can make that statement if you don't have that number.
Well, I looked at the expense statement, and
Right, so what's your model expense ratio for maintenance and repairs?
well, there's not an actual model repair and maintenance, but we're looking at between $1,000 and $1,500 at the high end for repair and maintenance, and this one's about $2,000.
But you don't know what the model applied to, is what you're saying.
No.
The evidence for capitalization rate, just page 5 is your standard table for rates, is that fair to say?
Right.
And page 6, 5A, I should say, it says here they are not meant to be comparable specific to the subject property, is that correct?
For examples of cap rates.
They are not meant to be comparable specific to the subject property, it says at the top of page
Right.
5, is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And do you know if the, and the method by which you've done your cap rate workup, to your knowledge, has been, as it says here, is to take the questionnaire forms that have been provided to the city and divide them by reported sale price?
The questionnaire, sorry, what's the question?
They've been developed through stabilizing owner-reported income and expense information. Those are the city questionnaires that get sent out every year.
Yes.
So, for example, if you're saying that a property sold February 2018, you would be using a statement from a year prior?
If we had one, most likely, yes.
Okay, so you're not getting a statement as of the actual date of sale to derive any of these rates?
Well, in some cases we do. Like, we get returns from the owners.
Okay, which ones?
Well, we got returns from the owners on, I think it's Roach. I brought that. Darn, I didn't bring, I'm not sure which one
Okay.
we did and didn't.
And to your knowledge, did any of the reported sales they're using depend on the city's questionnaires to determine the decision-making purchase between purchaser and vendor and purchaser?
Well, it's,
Did they use the city questionnaire to determine their sale price?
did we use the city
Did the
questionnaire?
vendor and purchaser use the city questionnaire to determine the sale price when they sold to each other on any of your?
I don't know what they did to determine the sale price.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Okay, Maurice, questions?
Yeah, I was picking up on that mailer as well. I don't think the pages are numbered, but the first revenue, and that would be following the questionnaire page, I guess. I can see that the total revenue is 1,609,000. Are you following me, all of you?
Yep.
436, because there's no numbers, so that's why I couldn't tell you. The mailer, okay, and you're at EGI at 1821, which is quite a difference there. On the other hand, when I look at the expense page, which is there's a couple of blanks there, then if I read this correctly, the expenses are 1,366,000. Am I reading this properly here when I'm looking at these statements?
I looked at this,
Which doesn't mean to,
there's, sorry,
which, there's something doesn't make sense here, and I don't, because there's only an NOI of 242,
right.
which is out of line, so I don't know.
There's a lot of things in here we don't count, like mortgage payment of 685,000. And then there's a mortgage principal reduction, a credit. There's amortization of leasing costs. I don't know what that is. And on the previous page, there is almost $22,000 in appliances. There's $16,000 in fire and safety. I'm not sure what that is. And then there's just a general repair and maintenance of $101,000.
I guess I'm mostly interested on the revenue side at this point, because that's cleaner anyway.
Right, yeah.
Because they've got the residential rent, they got the vacancy to come out at 1,609,000.
No, I agree. The 17 income is 1,609,436.
Okay, and you've got 1,821,000. On the expense side, it's a different issue.
Right.
Okay, that's all I was, because the cap rate, I was looking at that as well, but I think the appellant asked the question already.
Yeah, I think we've determined the cap rate's very accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Cynthia, questions?
Yeah, my question in a somewhat similar vein, it was asked already, I think, but just to confirm, so the rent roll, in looking at it, the rents seem to generally be lower in almost every case than what the model has put on here. So you did look at that and it wasn't adjusted, or?
I have to apologize. Mr. Neufeld called me, tried to settle for, come to a consensus on some of these, and we weren't able to,
We weren't able to, it wasn't that we weren't able to agree, we just, neither of us had.
You missed each other, I heard you talking.
The time.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't argue about it.
No,
We
Yeah,
just
no,
disagreed.
no, I I heard you saying that you missed each other on a call. So.
Yeah, yesterday I was, whatever, everybody's really busy. You know, I'm not any busier than anybody else. But I guess in fairness, the 2018 was an agreement between the assessor and the applicant at $16,306,000. And I agree we're higher on income. I'm thinking that the actual expenses are quite a bit lower than what our model expenses are as well. So if somebody would have reviewed this, they may have thought the assessment wasn't bad, but or not accurate. My feeling is that the assessment should be higher than 2018.
But perhaps not worth saying.
Possibly not
Yeah,
all the
okay.
way to the assessment.
Okay, that's all I have, thanks.
Okay, I have no questions and haven't been asked, so you can proceed, Mr. Newfield.
Sorry, as usual, Mr. Lucky's given me a fair amount of information to think about here. Okay. I was just doing a quick review of the statements, and I didn't prepare this, and I'm gonna make a small correction in the income. There was one line of expense that I noted that we didn't pick up on, and that was amortization of leasing costs, and I agree with the assessor, that does not belong in the statement. As far as some of the other things he mentioned, like appliances, of course they belong. That's part of running an operation. If you have 112 units, you're replacing at least 10 fridges a year, because that's just the way it works. And I haven't adjusted our little formula. Our little formula, we tend to take the income, last year of income and an average of 2 years in expenses. All I did is I just took the current year of 2017 to speed things along. And the NOI, the expenses, we put down 821, 898. They're actually 789, 862. And the revenue 1609. There's no disagreement there. And earlier the assessor.
What was the expense figure?
789,862. So that changes our NOI to 819,575. And that's based on actual 2017 performance. The assessor in his commentary thought that some of these expenses were higher, but of course that's not the case at all. The assessment department used expenses at 847,525, and we're saying 789,862, which is lower than the assessment department has. So we have lower expenses and of course much lower income, leading to a lower NOI of 819,575 on the actual operations. And looking at previous year's performance, he made another comment that they should go up, but the previous year's performance, give you an idea that for example, 2013, the NOI was 854,329. 2016, 772, 756. So there's no revenue growth happening here. There's some ups and downs based on periodic vacancy. As far as the cap rate is concerned, again, this is the first time I've reviewed it too. We're prepared to go lower in the cap rate, and I was just looking for our famous Ward Avenue sale that always seems to get brought up. And in the assessor's workup, it's interesting that they still have it pegged at 5% as a cap rate. It's on my page 34. Our company did the sale. It's 5.5% at point of purchase time. So I don't know, I think the city's information is just old when it comes from mailers and it doesn't reflect the actual date. It's probably a year out of date. And when property gets sold, they don't want to know what it did a year ago. They want to know what it did at time of sale and what it's going to do in the future. So that was a 5.5% cap rate. There's another one we have here, which is 228 Notre Dame. This was a renovated high-rise. That's at 5.53%. Small commercial unit in there. And then we have a number of other sites. So 21 Roslyn should be in that ballpark at 5.5%. And that number adjusted down using the actual income comes to $14,901,363, rounded to $14,901,000. Now, as far as comparing it to last year's assessment, I would ask you in this case not to bother. The last 4 years of this property have been impacted by penalties. This is the first year we don't have a penalty request. So it's the same owner. Things are just where they're in compliance this year. So you know when you have a penalty problem, the final decision is mixed up with that problem. I was just looking for the settlement, and we settled 14, right? But don't we still have? So we. No.
I only wrote down 18. I'm not sure what happened previously.
Yeah. Okay.
I could have checked, but I didn't.
Yeah, but we had there was a penalty request last year cycle, and the assessor had made a recommendation, and we knew full well that it was going to end up going to here it is right here from last year's, and we knew that it was going to appeal, and I think the penalty was denied, and the city appealed this property.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Let me just double check something based on
I
the
think,
way.
yeah.
Yeah, there was no penalty, but then it was appealed. So that's why it really bears no weight. It's just one of those ongoing fights. This is the first year we've actually had an unencumbered, a chance to present this property free of the penalty problems. So 14,901,000, which is actual 2017 income capped at 5.5%. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Lucky?
No, I don't have any questions.
Maurice, questions?
Oh, yeah, I'm still doing some,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
doing some figuring here.
That's last year's, so it was city appeal.
Cynthia, questions?
What's the general, in your opinion, the general overall condition of this building?
It's, you know, I was only in it about 6 years ago, and at that time it was 1970s vintage. There's been no capital expenses. There's been nothing abnormal on it. It's well maintained. It's not been remodeled, and because there's no motivation to do so. When you're getting rents in this category, and I'm just trying to look at the rent roll here. Yeah, I mean, the rents applied in this building run between $980 to $1,700 per unit. There's no upside that renovation will give you. Most of the renovated properties we're looking at are looking for above guideline increases and moving up, improving their viability or their attractiveness to the rental market. I think we're at the top of the range, so there's nowhere to go. So it's well-maintained 1970 vintage.
And I'm, because some of these streets I'm not necessarily familiar with, some of the side streets, I'm just trying to, so this is west of Osborne on Roslyn, correct?
East.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's east?
East side.
Okay, then I'm not thinking in the right spot, okay. Bryce, yes, okay, now I know where that is. Yeah, okay, that Bryce runs into River, correct? Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you.
Well, I can maybe,
Okay, go ahead, your calculator's tool.
well, I was trying to find out the expense ratio, and the city, because the appellant made a comment about some expenses here, and he came up with a new 789,862 figure. Anyway, that's what I picked up. In relation to his 1609, that's a 49% expense ratio. The city's at 4652. Now, I was trying to see what is proper to apply here, because the city's obviously using a different income, so I don't know if I could get clarification on that. I don't know if my question makes sense, but the ratio is a little different here.
Yeah, I agree. It's different than what the city has. We have historical statements going back to 2012, and the ratio, the previous year was 55%. 49%, 48% roughly. Here we have a year where it was about 65%. I just found a statement from '09. So I think it's historically been in the close to the 50% category. It's kind of would be expected, because there's no way to offload utilities to the tenants. It's a fixed building, so okay, electrical, I take that back. No, electrical is tenant. There is a parkade, so that will drive up your expense ratio. Oh, okay, sorry, I was wrong. Electricity, yes, is paid for by the building, $40,000. Cable is paid by the building, $30,000. Gas and water, $83,000. So, property taxes, wow, $200,000 property taxes. It's pretty high. That's what it is. It's always had a high ratio.
Okay, that's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, then, for your presentations. We shall move onwards and upwards to 391 Gertrude.
Give me just 1 second on that file. I think we did have some discussions on that one.
If you want to take a few minutes.
No, like 10 seconds. We didn't submit evidence, did we?
No.
No, okay, we just confirmed that.
Okay, then read through your info.
Well, we're not gonna appeal it, don't worry. I just haven't got my instructions yet to withdraw from my client.
Give us the roll
Sure.
number and then.
391 Gertrude Avenue is roll number 120-212-08-200. We have a 1968 two-story building. There's 42 suites. We have model parameters. Included renovation permit that was $814,000. There's a breakdown of the work. And, we have a sale of 3.5 on the property of 2011. I would ask that you maintain the assessment.
Okay, and Cynthia, any questions?
Thank you.
Nice.
So thank you.
And then I take it, Mr. Newfeld, you're declining to present evidence?
No, that was pretty,
on Gertrude, yeah.
sorry, I'm moving ahead already.
Yeah.
That's correct.
You're ahead of your time once again.
I'm going to the next one.
You've moved on.
Okay, we'll move on to follow Rocky to 26 Russell Road.
26, oh, sorry,
You can proceed.
okay. 26 Roslyn Road,
File number and roll number and all that stuff.
oh, file number as well, okay, sorry. File number 19 dash 4572. The roll number is 120-324-35000. We have three-story 1958 building with 21 suites. This is roughly across the street from the previous one, 21. We have model parameters, and in this instance, we're lower than the Mr. Newfeld. For NOI, our cap rate is 5.3, and I would ask that we maintain the $1,526,000 assessment.
Okay, questions, Mr. Newfeld?
They would be the same questions I asked previously, and just assuming the answers would be
Yeah,
the
if
same.
it's on things like cap rate and that.
Right, and nothing specific on this other than the statement. Did you review the statement?
Well, yeah, in fact I did. The repair and maintenance is almost $10,000 a unit, so I assume some sort of capital in that. Seems high.
But your workup is all done by the model?
That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Cynthia, any questions?
No, I don't think so, thank you. I'm just assuming the expense ratio, I know this is all modeled, and the cap, these are based probably on the age,
Right.
because they're different than previously. Okay, thank you.
Maurice?
No questions.
So just cap at 5.3, that's like at the upper end of your range, your 80th quartile, or percentile rather, because of the age.
It's in line with what we're seeing. You know, we're getting returns. People are telling us that's in line. The actual cap rate sales that we look at are in line with that.
Okay, thank you. You can proceed, Mr. Lucas.
Sorry, just to follow up, please clarify your comments. People aren't telling you that. That's the conclusion the assessment department is drawing based on review.
No, we're getting returns coming in. By
People aren't telling you that, are they?
purchasers are reporting. I've seen cap rates of 4.5 and 5.5.
In your, by rating the income and expense questionnaire?
No, when we ask for the details of the sale,
But you haven't presented any of those, have you?
I haven't presented those.
Thank you.
Okay, you can present now.
Yes, I was just looking for something again. I thought the file had it. Can I just, do you show this as being under appeal from last year? I seem to be missing my last year's
I'm
numbers.
pretty sure that I did it, but I can't, I didn't look at the results.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that I had it last go around.
Yeah, yes, I know. I was just, I'm not sure if we appealed it. I recommended
I
an
don't know.
appeal, and I can't remember if I filed one, and I can't find my paperwork.
I didn't check.
Okay, that's correct, we are disagreeing on, pretty much on a cap rate issue. The reference here showed an abnormally high repair and maintenance bill, and not renovation based, it's just ongoing work in the building. There's been no major renovations. This particular property owner will undertake large-scale repairs from time to time on their properties, and they can involve piecework or certain elements that are that they want to address, and in doing so, you can get a line item or above guideline increase, not a total renovation gets you exemption from the rent controls. On a small scale project, you can make application and get a change in it. Now, what happens though with properties is even though you can apply for a higher rent, that doesn't mean you're charging it. It just means that in the future you have that ability to go to that rent. It's been registered against the property, and that's the situation most people with blocks like this find themselves in. And a reading of the statements will indicate that that is the case. There's been no upside on the revenue for this site, anything above a normal increase. And we have the statements going back again on this property and got back to 2007. And this is not a renovation project. The building has been a high expense building for this particular owner, and anyway, so we adjusted it. Dispute is the cap rate, and for this particular property, location is not a factor. In terms of should Roslyn Road have a higher cap rate because of where it's located, and the answer is no, of course not. This isn't a luxury condominium project. This is just your basic average block. On page 35, we have a very, very good comparable. At the bottom of page 35, and these are two units across the street from each other that sold as a package, 26 and 45 Hargrave. They're built in 1959, a year newer than the subject. They were renovated beginning in 2011. And these were sold as renovated and as occupied, and our company did the transaction. 6.62% was based on the actual pro forma that vendor and purchaser were relying on for this sale at 6.62%. Now, if the city were to pull the questionnaire on this one, of course it's not going to be the same, because the sale wasn't predicated in the questionnaire. It was predicated on an actual pro forma put together, agreed to by purchaser and vendor. 6.62, which is our reasoning for the cap rate we have. That's a fabulous example, and there's a few other examples in here of buildings. There's one on 1830 Portage on page 34, which is 6.58%. That's exactly the same purchaser as this subject property owner. And on 600 Charles at 7.04%. In the properties I'm quoting, I've inspected them as well, and one or two of them have been involved in the transaction. So again, we're very clear. We're not taking out-of-date data and trying to apply it to a sale at the time we're on the site. We want to use reliable information. So at 6.25%, that value that we have is $1,342,000. I have no problem if you want to use the city's NOI, but to be consistent, if you're using the city NOI and you're using real cap rates, theoretically it's unsound. We're using actual rent, actual cap rates, and that's how we're coming up with their value. And I'm about 95% sure that this was filed at municipal board for the past assessment, and because and I can't find my forms, but there was no change in it from the previous appeal, and so yes, it was appealed. Thank you very much.
Questions, Mr. Lucky?
No questions.
Cynthia, any questions?
No, I think I'm good, thanks.
Maurice?
No, thank you.
Just, we look at that sale that you're saying is the best, Hargrave. That was like 5 years before the reference date. How accurate would the cap rate be then?
Well, we haven't noticed a difference. I think what we're seeing more is an increase in the base level reported rates. And the reason why is that there are fewer and fewer renovation jobs on the market. And if you have a renovation project, the cap rates tend to leak into people's studies. They shouldn't be there to begin with. In our Collier's report, it takes me a while to answer a question because I have to remember what it was. On page 18 and 19, this is the unedited report. Remember that these rates are based on the cap rate for the purchaser, so they include commissions and things. So you'll see that page 18, which is the 2016, ranges as a low of 475 to a high of 575, and 2 years later, the low is 5 and the high is 6. So we showed an increase in the last 2 years, not a decrease. But, and also caution when looking at those to look at page 21, which are the definitions. Also, I'm going to squeeze this in rebuttal somewhere, and you can put whatever weight on it you like. It's the study that I'm showing you, that I'm referring to, actually was based on this hard data that I have, and just to show you the raw numbers on this by province.
I'm not sure you can present evidence in response to a question.
No, yeah, I'm gonna get it at some point, I'm gonna get it at some
Yeah,
point.
put it in rebuttal.
Yeah, okay, you're right. The point is that these Winnipeg cap rates that the city has are far lower than the North American overall rates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just a redirect on that.
Sure.
The 26 and 45 Hargrave. So the January 13th sale, were those buildings just renovated then, or
Yeah,
what?
the renovation was complete and they were being leased up. I think the renovation was completed,
So they were completely renovated?
yeah, 4 or 5 months prior to sale. And I think at the time of sale, they had leased up their last unit.
So if they were all renovated, they would have higher rent and lower expense in comparison to the subject that isn't completely renovated?
Well,
I mean, to get a higher cap rate, if you have higher income and lower expense, you get a higher cap rate, don't you?
No. The concept of cap rate is income versus sale price. And all that happens is the income increased from renovation and so did the sale price. Cap rate is a constant because that's what the investors want on the market. The investors are not going to buy 5% buildings.
I guess the question was, were they renovated?
Yes, they were.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go on to number 4. Maybe we'll do one more and then have a short break. We'll do 825 Gordon Avenue. So you can proceed, Mr.
File number 19-2135, roll number 12022627000, 825 Gordon Avenue, is a 1955 three-story building with an effective age of 1975. And we've on page 3, it shows that there's 21 one-bedrooms. We have model income and expense, and in the end, we're close. We're a couple $1,000s apart on NOI. Our income's a little higher, and I guess our expenses are a little higher. But mainly a cap rate issue, and I would ask that you maintain the assessment.
Okay. Questions, Mr. Nicola?
Same as all model generated and, okay, asked and answered, right?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Maurice, questions?
No, thank you.
Cynthia?
Good, thank you.
Okay, just one question on the cap. It's 5%. The previous was 5.3. Same sort of vintage initially, but maybe this one's been updated a bit. So is that what's driving the lower cap rate?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Thank you. You can proceed.
Sorry, where was this material you were saying about upgrading? I was just wondering where you saw that. Did he,
Well, I'm just.
was there something stated about it?
It's the effective age.
Effective year built.
Oh, okay, all right.
The effective age has been changed at some point.
At
due
some
to
point,
renovations.
okay. Assumed renovations, right?
Well, somebody would have went out and seen renovations and changed the effective age.
I'm just looking for, through my files to see if we had record of anything being done on it, so that's why I asked the question. Okay.
Okay, you can proceed with your presentation.
Okay, just, this is the same property owner as 21 Roslyn, and you remember we were discussing about income rates, expense ratios on that building, and here we have another one, same operator, and the expense ratio is 41.6%, the actual. So, I guess what I'm trying to say, it's just a building, it's not anything to do with, other than how does the building operate and run. This one just tends to run a bit cheaper than the other one. I don't see in the statements, I'm just going through it, if there has been, this particular owner during his ownership period had spent any money on capital, and I don't have anything indicated, so regardless, I did a quick review of the statements, and I note that we're using 137,582 for NOI, and the statement for 17 would actually indicate 138,333. Not a major difference, and I'm not going to make any changes because it's a few $100s difference, nothing substantial. The cap rate as before, I would suggest our cap rate in this particular case is probably should be consistent with what was presented earlier on the information I was relying on for this building. What is a slight concern on this building, which drove us to consider a lower cap rate, is that this is located outside an overlay zone. So, for example, in Osborne Village, there are several overlay zones where you can get variances for lower parking, either through mitigating it in some manner or historically. In this particular case, the Corydon doesn't have an overlay zone here, and so it is seriously underserviced for parking. So it would still be a better investment, I believe, in 6.75, but parking was the problem, and also that it's all one-bedroom units, which limits its attractiveness in the market. I was just going to offer a slight change to 6.5%, basically for those two factors. And I don't know if you want me to do the math, but I didn't do any of these workups myself, so what you're getting here is my personal input. Not know how to use a calculator. 137,582.065. So I was just at 6.5%. I would suggest a number of 2,116,646, rounded to 2,117,000. And again, remind you that cap rates have increased, not decreased. Thank you.
Mr. Lucky, questions? No, did you say no questions?
No questions.
Okay, Cynthia, questions?
No.
Maurice?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I have, just gotta do some straggling. Okay, it's 10 o'clock now. Let's have a 10-minute break, then we'll go on to our last four properties.
Okay.
We'll reconvene and move to 915 Corydon. So you can proceed.
915 Corden, the roll, file number 194550, roll number 12023045100. We have a 3-story 1913 building with 60 units. There's 4 bachelors, 48 one-bedrooms, and 12 two-bedrooms. These are all model parameters. Again, there's a permit for major upgrading of $1.4 million, and this was February of 18. So I don't know if anybody's inspected the building yet, but I pulled the permit and it's, I'm not sure what I included in the brief. Maybe just the first couple pages. Anyway, I would model parameters were slightly higher than the actual, and the actual in terms of income. I looked at the expenses, and I have a different, I have a lower number than our actual expenses. So I would revise the NOI to 229,613. And at 6.6 cap, that would be a change to 3,479,000. That would be.
Sorry, and what did you change to get there? To
I
bring the NOI
changed,
down?
using the actual income of 493,580.
Oh, okay, the actual income, okay.
And the expenses that I came up with were 263,967 for an NOI of 229,613, and capped at 6.6 is 3,479. That's would be my opinion of value.
I take it, well, how do you feel about that recommendation?
It's the first time I've heard it. Well, I think we have to hear this one because there's some unique issues concerning it.
Okay. So is that all for your presentation?
That's all.
Okay, any questions?
Yes. Do you know why, you said earlier you're not entirely sure why the permit was taken out?
No, there's there's quite a bit of detail, actually.
Yeah, well, did you look at page 5 of the permit?
On the top right corner, it says page 5.
That's correct.
Section 2, description of work.
Upgrades to damaged wall and floor fire separation and replacement of damaged interior doors. You were not aware that the place was destroyed, well, partially destroyed by fire?
It says there's damage, yeah, it says, repair work of $1.4 million.
Well, as a matter of fact, you would have it in your records from the last reassessment when we brought this fire damage to the board. And that would have been on February 20th, 2018. And
Right.
on this assessor's brief 2018, it says he recommended a reduction to via recent fire. So that is in your records that there was
Right.
place was fire damage.
Yeah, I don't,
No, I'm just saying, so for, the permits weren't for upgrades, they were for fire repairs. You
well,
accept
it's
that-
gonna
that's
be upgraded.
required of code upgrades, of course, but
It'll be new decorating and new kitchens and bathrooms, and all the things that were destroyed.
okay, and does that increase the value? Does that make them get better rents?
Well, if the suites will be vacated, and if they're renovated, they could get a higher rent, yeah.
How? Don't you have to get approval from residential tenants' branch for that?
Yes.
You had mentioned you're using $493,000 for the income, which is the actual income then, correct?
Right.
And that was the actual income for both 2016 and 17 on your statements? Or do you have that information?
I have 17 here.
Just 17, okay.
Well, yeah, you have it,
Yeah.
16 and 17, almost exactly the same.
And their expenses, you applied the 263,000, that was a, is that a model rate? A ratio?
Well, I looked at the actuals, and the repair and maintenance again is high at 208,000. That's almost $3,300 a unit. So I reduced that.
Okay, well, did you look at the prior years of expenses? Were they also, and I'm not gonna disagree with you on that particular figure, but did you review prior periods for expense ratios?
No.
Okay. And the city's expense on page 3 that you have, this is generated by the model, is 295,000, and you're suggesting 263 now.
Well, it's based on a higher income. It's a percent of.
Right,
higher
and
income.
that was the question I was getting to earlier, so
Yeah.
you just carried that percentage forward.
You see-
Yeah, you did.
Did I?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, well then I don't have any questions asked. That's all I
think
wanted.
so.
It's just being a little difficult, too many questions to get to one little thing.
There's a lot of numbers there.
Yeah, okay.
Is that it for you?
That's it for my
what it is.
questions.
Okay, Maurice, any questions as a result of the calculations?
Well,
Glad I brought this guy to figure it out.
one little thing here that's not that important, but on your first page, you show 60 suites. And then you've got 64 on page 3, so, but I see the mailer has 64, so it's gotta be 64. Correct?
It does, this should be corrected. Sometimes when people enter the suite count, you have to put it in 2 places. Sometimes it only gets entered in 1. And normally it gets entered into the workup one, which is what drives the assessment. But there's another spot that's hidden, and it may not have been changed there.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just,
It's a good note, though. I'll look to have that second entry corrected.
The other is, I found it unusual, this is a 1913 building, and you've still got that after that permit, but obviously February 18th, 2018, is that what the date of the permit? I don't know, I thought you said that. Maybe I'm wrong.
February of 18 is,
Of 18, okay.
right,
Now, that,
there's a few different dates.
yeah, my question was really, obviously there'd been a fire there, there's a lot of stuff that went on to renovate that place. Obviously, it must look better, but would you pick that up on the next cycle, or that's why you're sticking to 1913? Do you know, I'm trying to get my head around this.
I don't, I should have checked if somebody's been there. In some instances, if damage is repaired, they don't change the effective age. But I don't know that if somebody's been there and if the effective age should be changed or not.
Because April the 1st, 2018, if the permit's taken out in February, it's pretty darn hard to have that, although you gotta look at today's condition, I guess, when you come
It's
up
current
with it.
condition, you're right.
Current condition, so I just was trying to sort of reconcile the 1913 to after all those changes. Anyway, that was a question
There could be an effective age change.
but that's not the case.
Sure
And
is.
is 660 your highest rate for stuff like this? On your cap rate, page 5? Oh no, you go to 730, I guess. Is that what you do?
730 is
The highest.
7.3 is the highest.
When do you use that? When do you use that, 730? 1913 building, low rise?
That would be in inferior locations.
Okay.
North End, if that's inferior. There's 2 districts that we have higher cap rates than the rest of the cities. So the rest of the city.
So that would be the main reason between the 660 and the 730?
Right.
Okay, that's all, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Cynthia?
So back to the fire issue, I know this was modeled, and then the model's not picking that up, but would you, in an instance like that, would you, in some cases, look at vacancy that may be caused by a situation like that, and or the expenses that are incurred with something like that, or? The expense ratio is higher than we've seen on some of the other properties today, but.
The expense ratio is based on a number of factors. If somebody reviewed it, they could have changed the expense ratio, but a building this age, that expense ratio is in line.
Not considering the fact that there was a fire, same with the vacancy, I'm correct? Obviously, that wasn't considered in this,
Right.
in those numbers, okay. All right, that's all.
This would be pre.
Yeah, pre-fire.
Yeah, just on that, I mean, obviously you lose all your clients, all your tenants. Should there not be a releasing period considered?
That would have been looked at. If somebody looking at the damage, the fire damage, there would be a reflection for that.
Okay, which I guess is $1 million for the previous cycle. But I'm just wondering now that the repairs have been done, that you're looking for new tenants. Well, obviously all the old tenants have moved on.
I'm not sure to what extent the building was damaged.
Okay, you can proceed, Mr. Newfield.
So the fire occurred, just looking for the exact date of it. I know I inspected the property when it was, I believe in February of 2018. And it was inside the damaged property, and I had pictures of it in a previous, if anyone wants to see the extent of the damage, it was in the last assessment period. At the time, we also commissioned a contractor to provide us with issues relating to the code review. I'm sorry, I'm just stumbling through this. So we had code review issues, and he gave us a very long list of items, but perhaps we can just refer to the assessor's information at the last page, just to get an idea of the scope of work. I disagree that there was an improvement on this, because if you look at what they had to spend the money on, other than repair, which is the framing, interior framing and the finish. Point A, fire safety systems. Look at what they put is significant. Fire separations, alterations to HVAC, and electrical distribution. Those were the major items that money was spent on, 1.4 million in repairs. Now, when you look at, does this make this a better building? The point is, you have to ask the residential tenancies branch if that does, or if it doesn't. And what work was done here doesn't qualify for exemption from rent controls. That requires all 5 major items to be reviewed. And to my knowledge, insurance claims don't qualify under the residential tenancy branch for a capital investment, because it's not a capital investment, it's characterized as a repair, not an improvement. The code review was the big cost, and there was a concern that the insurance would cover this or not. And we had identified in our inspection code review costs that were up to $2 million, depending on what the code review stated. There was, for example, knob and tube wiring in the basement, and there was some aluminum wiring. There was no HRV, air transfer envelopes, plumbing. The existing plumbing was 1.5 inches, so the code requires 2 inches. There was the use of wood in fire on the stairwells, and whether or not there would be a requirement for going to steel. And we identified the emergency exit issues and fire suppression systems. So this was a report that was submitted on the last, when we had it reviewed, and the board at that time changed it to a value of $1 million, which was just a rather arbitrary number to account for. It was basically land value, and it was a long time repair job. Now, our statements are all pre-fire statements, and in them, there's no disagreement on revenue being roughly $493,000. On our page 1, 2017 was a higher year for costs, but the repair work wasn't begun until 2018. So I was just checking the dates of the submissions, and of course this does not include fire repair work, and because it's also not a cost, it's the fire repair is an insurance claim. So they had an excessively high year of repairs, which is to be expected in a 1913 building. what we do is we average it out with previous years. So in the previous years, you can see it was 270,000 one year, 272 the next year, 383 the highest year. We average it out to 308,000 because that's just typical with expenses. That you can have bad years and good years. So we ended up with an NOI of 184,694, and that's our greatest difference to the assessor. The cap rate, if we were discussing a difference between 7% and 6.6%, it's not a major issue for the property. But we have had no allowance for the absorption period in our calculations. It's like an on-off switch. At first it was burnt down and now it's fixed. So I think 7% is better to use just to account for the absorption period. I know absorption was relatively quick. I think the number I got was approximately 4 months after occupancy permit was gained before absorption was achieved. And regardless of whether it was covered by insurance, that's not the point. Insurance is not rental income on a property and can't be considered. Once your occupancy permit is granted, then it's a question of does your coverage, how long does your coverage go for something like this on a business interruption. There was another point I was just looking at. Oh yeah, earlier I said that if you have a fire and you get repaired, you can't get an increase in your rental rate. And so who cares what one wants to call it, whether it's renovated or not, that's irrelevant. Now, fortunately Mr. Hutchings isn't here, so I was able to check my phone and to check the current rental rates compared to what the claimed rental rates were in 2017. And the number varied by $30 for a suite, which is a little over 4% over the 3-year period of reporting, which is the RTB allowable increase, which I believe is 1%, 1.5%, and I think another further 1.5%. So there's been no increase attributable. They had no approval for increasing the rental rates due to fire. So looking at it as being an improved property is not valid. That is my presentation. I think the number we have here is probably addresses most of the factors. But I don't think we had a supplemental on this, so the $1 million was in place for 2 full years. And I think that was fair with the treatment of the site. Thank you very much.
Questions, Mr. Lucky?
No questions.
Cynthia, questions?
No, I think I'm good, thank you.
Maurice?
Yeah, I was looking at the evidence for the expenses, and obviously except for what's listed on the front page, I didn't see anything to back that up. The expense in 2017 is $111,000 higher than the 2 previous years. And I believe you had made the argument that you were looking for some consistency. I'm not sure you used those terms. But the NOI of 2015 was 198, 2016 was 220.
Right.
And then to 2617, you, by adding that 111, you're at 109. While if I look at the city's NOI revised, although it's at 229 more or less, and you're now at 184. So I've got a hard time to reconcile the expense issue with nothing to back it up in the back except the evidence you have in the front.
Well, first of all, page 4 is the statement.
Yeah.
And that's the same one the city has provided as well. We have the other statements from previous years that were submitted to the city, if you want to read them. So there is evidence, number one, to your first question. The second question was the variable NOI attributable to one high year of expenses. That is correct, that's what happened. The way we deal with it properly is, generally in an apartment block, the revenue tends to increase because you're governed by rent controls and everybody takes their allowable increase. It's usually 1% to 2% per year. And you can see from their statements that happened. We took the highest income from there, not the lowest, not the average, but the growing income. That's our standard methodology. But we average the expenses, and that's the difference. So we're not relying on the 109,000 NOI from 2017. We're saying it's 184,000. And we're not taking the average NOI, which is 176. We're taking 184. We're looking at the last year of income and an averaged expense over the 3-year cycle, because you can't budget your expenses. When they happen, they happen. And so the best way is to average them out. Now, from previous years, what would be more pertinent is to say, what's the experience been like over the last 5 years, 7 years? Is this consistent? You know, is this, how you know, if the high expenses in 17, were they 1 year, or did this happen all the time? And I'm just looking for previous years' statements, and okay, well, I grabbed an older one from 2009, 10, and 11, and the expenses ranged from 240 to 246. So they'd had a couple of stable years. In 2012, 262, 13, 279. And so what this is looks like is that the oh yeah, here's my last one, sorry. In 14, 285, and then 15, 270, 272, and then the last year in 17 was 383. So the only thing I would say in that respect is we probably could have looked at that this was a one-time problem. We could have likely averaged it out over a longer period. So potentially you could have a slightly higher NOI on that basis if I took a 5-year period to average instead of a 3-year period. But we didn't use 17 income. We didn't use 109,000, we used 184,000.
No, you used a 493 income.
Well, net income, 184, not
Okay,
109.
but you said income. Income was 493.
Well, okay, usually my terminology, when I say income, is net income. When I would say rent, I would say revenue.
I'm just trying to.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, as long as we understand each other. So I think I think your question is interesting in that, in this case, should I have gone back 5 years to average out the expenses to account for one bad year? And that's probably a pertinent observation, and perhaps the NOI would increase you know, when you bring in some lower numbers. So a 5-year average, you're going to probably see about a $10,000 difference in NOI over term, in and around that number. What did I say it was? It was prior period before the 270 was 285, before that was 279, and we're using an average of 308. So in both those cases, that's 25 and 30, that's 55 divided by 5, yeah, $10,000 a year. I'm doing some very quick mathematical things, but if I used a 5-year average for expenses, yes, my NOI would be $10,000 higher. And you know, that's, I don't mind making an adjustment for it on that basis. That's what we come to hearings to examine this stuff.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, that's it.
Did I ask you something at the end?
Yeah, I'm good.
Thank you. We'll move to 195 Wentworth Street. So you may begin, Mr. Lucky.
195 Wentworth is file number 194617, roll number 120-229-18000. Here we have a 1913 building, 3 stories, 15 suites. Suite mix is 13 2-bedrooms and 2 3-bedrooms. The Newfeld's NOI is $500 higher than ours, so we'll accept his. And we differ in cap rate.
Well, I think you gotta be consistent in that application if you accept 9.
But anyway, I would hope that you would maintain our assessment of $1,222,000.
Okay, any questions?
I guess on that basis, that's difficult now. Your valuation on page 3 was done by the model?
It is.
Okay, that's my question then, thank you.
Okay, Maurice? Any-
No, I think I'm okay.
Okay, Cynthia?
Yep, okay.
Okay, proceed with your presentation.
Just 10 seconds again, I just spotted something I wanted to double check before I open my big mouth.
Actually, I'd like to correct my one question. The model expense ratio wouldn't be 55%. Somebody would have reviewed this and changed it.
Oh, yeah, you know what, I was gonna ask you about that,
So this has been,
someone's, based on the age?
someone reviewed it and that's why we're so close. Somebody matched it to the actuals. We do a big review session of assessments and try and hit as many buildings as we can. And some of the other ones may have been reviewed as well, most likely. But this one's glaring because it's an exact expense ratio, 55%. I don't think the model necessarily would say that.
Okay, so you can proceed, Mr. Newfield.
Yes, well, thanks for stalling for me, because I found out what I was looking
A withdrawal form?
for. No, the reason why we put in the income and expenses we did, not just put revenue and expenses we did, you'll note that in 2017, there was a significant increase in revenue. And I was just looking back to previous year's statements, and the rental rates are the same in each year. So I imagine we are impacted by either vacancy or previous years, or there's an accounting differential. Anyway, that's why in this particular case, we applied the 2017, and we didn't average things out. And the differences are marginal. As far as capitalization goes, our issues with this property are, this is really interesting considering we're just talking about fires on the previous property. This is the same vintage, and if you look at page 2, the Winnipeg first Winnipeg fire bylaw for multifamily took effect in 1912. And there were a whole bunch of fires previous to that time, and what they wanted, what the planners wanted to do was to stop unit walls from touching each other. So buildings like this began to be built, and you can see that the goal here was to have a fire separation done by either a hallway or straight to the outside to reduce the spread of fire. Now the issue with that is that it's a much costlier building to maintain. As with the previous building built in 1913, if you look at the way it was designed, it was with that 1912 fire bylaw. Now, the most extreme example, by the way, is 626 Ward Law, which they tell you was designed to be like a star, but it was designed for so that each unit had only an exterior wall. The cost is what comes up in this, because you're running higher utility costs, of course, with more envelope and higher maintenance costs. There is no parking for this site, and it's smaller. My issue with the small units is that when you look at expenses and ratios, we're at 57% and actually assessors at 55%. But when you have a fixed cost, such as if you replace a door in a building, you have 15 units to divide that cost by, whereas if you do it in a 40-suite unit, you only each have 2 doors, back and a front. You're spreading it over more units. So any fixed cost impacts the bottom line more on a small unit. I've always stated that that equilibrium is reached by 30 units. That's what you would prefer to have to control your fixed costs. So anything below the 30 units, it provides a higher expense ratio and a more unpredictable expense ratio. And the bedroom mix is all large units. There's no small units, which is another interesting mix. The optimal mix is generally 1s and 2s and maybe a handful of 3s. That's the optimal mix, but it's usually one bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. So with that mix, with the 3-bedroom units, you're looking for higher rents, but you're occupying twice the space of a 1-bedroom unit, but you're only getting 40% more rent. And that's the real problem with having the bigger units, is your rent per square foot is lower. So an investor looks at it, and if this was demised differently with the square footage it had, and had 1s and 2s, you'd probably hit 25 to 30 units, which would be a good investment. So that's why we went to 7 1/4. And no, I won't beat it to death. It could be 7%, 7 1/4. And the comparables I discussed earlier are superior to this one because they have a better building design. Looking to see if we have anything of this style in our cap rate report. Well, we have smaller units, and that's page 34, where there's a 6-unit on Church and a 12-unit on Charles, which I referenced earlier, that capped higher than 34 units in below them. And that's what we would expect. And that's my presentation.
Questions, Mr. Nucky?
The cap rates you referred to on Church and Charles, how would those locations compare to Wentworth?
Well, the hottest location for multifamily is St. Boniface. Second is generally Elmwood. And those weren't, that's because it's the old saying, that's where the people live who rent apartments. It's not like a single family home where you want to be in a nice neighborhood and you pay more for the neighborhood. The neighborhood difference, the only variables on neighborhoods in multifamily would be in areas that are suffering from any form of urban blight, and none of these are.
So So somebody would pay the same rent in Charles and the North End as they would in Wentworth?
No, not necessarily, but they cap the same. An investor would look at it, I mean, when the investor's looking a lot, if you have a vacancy in Elmwood, and you can replace that vacancy in half a day of advertising, that's just as good as Corridon. And so you're gonna cap on that basis.
But Church and Charles are in Elmwood, they're in the North End, right?
Well, I guess Charles is North End, and I was bringing up Elmwood and Newcastle markets, yes.
Okay.
And Church is, I don't know what, I mean, sorry, Church is, it's right off Main Street. I don't know, like around 1600 block in that neighborhood, I think. I don't know what the neighborhoods are called.
They're different.
Well,
It's a different neighborhood anyway.
yeah, but the point is that an investor just cares about different things. It's what's my rate of return and how secure is it? So, you know, the thing a lot of people miss on, like rooming houses are generally considered to be a bad risk, but your vacancy rate for your rooming house can run a negative. Because if your tenant prepays their social assistance leaves halfway through, and you get a new tenant who pays another full month, and those are the things you have to consider when you're discussing neighborhoods. And caps.
No other questions?
Okay, Cynthia, any questions?
Yeah, so the previous building and this building are about a block apart, and they're the same age, and you've gone a quarter% bump higher on the cap here, so can you explain that again?
Certainly. The major reason is, I don't have both of them in front of me, make sure okay, well, both are impacted by lack of parking. The 915 has got a better unit mix, 48 one-bedrooms, 12 two-bedrooms, whereas this one is most is 2s and 3s. There are no one-bedroom units, and which means that your earnings per square foot are lower. And 15 units, and this is the major reason. The previous one has 64 units, this one's got 15 units. So the fixed cost expense is the same on both of them, generally. And when a fixed cost, a flat cost, or even something like paying your accountant, if your accountant charges you $1,000 a year for the books, it's the same cost in the 64 unit as the 15. So that means that cost ratios are higher.
A little earlier though, did you mention that one-bedroom units are not as desirable in some locations?
No, what I said was a mix is required. 1s and 2s are the predominant mix in our city.
So if you have all 1s, then
That's bad.
it's detriment. If you have all 2s, it's detriment.
Well, all 2s is probably better than all 1s.
For attracting tenants.
Yeah, because you're dealing with, most people are renting have income issues. And if you have 2s, then it's 2 people sharing a suite, and that works. If it's all 1s, then you don't have that flexibility. And 3s, there's very little demand in the market, because at that point, you know, in this case, what are they asking for a 3-bedroom? $1,200. That's above what social assistance will pay. And so you've lost one user right there.
Okay, that's all I have, thanks.
Hey, Maurice?
Have you inspected this property?
Yeah, at one time, yes.
Oh, what's that mean? How far back? I just like to find out the condition of it.
Oh, okay, wait a sec.
Just like the condition, if you've seen it, what's your
I went
view?
in there with, did I go in there with you? I went there with an assessor, so 2013. Kara was before you,
I worked with Karen, could have been her.
and I don't think it was Kim. I think it was with Kara, so that would have been, 2013. 2011.
And what was the condition in your view?
Typical, this property is owned by Smith Agency, and they're pretty consistent across the board. They're not ultra luxurious. They spend what they have to spend to keep them in good condition. Not renovated or done over.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So we'll move on to our penultimate property, 232 Hugo Street.
File number 19-4563, roll number 120-222-18000 is 23 Hugo Street North. We have one building, 3 stories, built in 1933. There's 18 suites. Eight indoor parking, which I guess refers to the garage, and we have a model the suite mix is 4 bachelors, 8 2-bedroom, and 6 3-bedroom. And our model vacancy and parameters, we differ about 10,000 in NOI, and that could be attributed to the higher than normal repair and maintenance of 26-28 a unit. The cap rates are 0.4% apart. I would ask that you maintain the assessment of $1,820,000.
Okay, questions, Mr. Newton?
Yes, you said the difference was due to expenses?
Yes, it could be.
Could be. Well, what are your expenses? Are $116,751?
The model income is 236.
No, the expenses.
With expenses of 49.23% is 116,751.
And you did note that our analysis indicated a stabilized expense rate of 113,000, which is lower than your expenses.
Right.
Do you think maybe our difference is probably on our revenue side?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, the revenue's different, but
It's just math here. You're at 242,000 gross, and we're at 223,000 gross.
right.
Okay, so that's our difference, right?
Right.
Okay. Those are my questions, thanks. Except, how come last time you said you'd accept mine, and then now this one time you don't?
Well, we're different. Not that far apart.
You were right last time, you were wrong this time.
Oh, that's right.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Cynthia, any questions? Of the assessor, I guess.
Yeah. No, I'm good, thanks.
Maurice?
Actually, your revenue is based on the mailer, right? On,
this is of the assessor, not of Mr. Newfield.
Are we still talking to the assessor?
Yeah,
Oh, boy, cheated then.
yes.
Okay, this model, okay, that's fine.
We all cheated because we were talking about it.
Well, yeah, it was close, you raised it, there was 10,000 difference, so I guess I jumped. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No problem.
It's just
So you can do your presentation now.
Yeah,
Maurice is loaded for bear, so.
I thought he was gonna accept it, and then I would have said, yeah, good enough, and then we move on. Okay, and in deference to an earlier question, again, we have in the reference here, higher expenses, we did not use them. That was an NOI of 95,000, we stabilized it with 3-year average. That's why our NOI is 110,000, and not 95,000. But we're not a major apart on the expenses other than I am lower. It's the income, and we're using actual income. A small difference on the cap, and again, that's, on this property, I mean, now it's 4/10 of a point apart, so I don't think it's the major issue at stake here. But I was asked some questions earlier, and I really like to be consistent. So this is, we're saying 7 rather than 7 1/4 because it's more units, it's 18. There is a mix that has some bachelors, but it has some variance in the mix, which is good. Better than the other one. It still should be 1 bedrooms, would still be better. There is parking on here. There's 16 parking stalls for 18 units. The others had 0 parking. So, and the age, it's a newer building, slightly newer, 20 years newer. So our income with a slight change in the capitalization rate. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Lucky?
No questions.
Maurice, now you can go.
No questions, thank you.
Cynthia?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Presentations, and our last property is back to Corden, 481 Corden.
481 Corden is file number 19-4339, roll number 1202156200. We have a single building, 2-story, built in 1956. There's 8 suites. There's 5 1-bedrooms and 3 2-bedrooms. Our model produced lower than actual income. And our NOIs are almost the same. I guess the difference being our cap rate for this building is 4.8% and 6.5 Mr. Newfield. I would ask that you maintain our assessment of 804,000.
Okay, questions, Mr. Newfield?
Yes, you've got a 4.8%. So in your page 5 model, or sorry, first of all, this is all generated by the model, all of this entire workup?
Yes.
Okay. And in multifamily, then that places it below the 20th percentile, does it not?
Right, yeah.
Now, does the assessment department test these rates with other forms of capitalization, such as the mortgage equity method?
No.
Do you test these rates on a global perspective with other products in Canada?
I don't know, we don't have cap rates from other parts of Canada, but I'm not sure what you mean by test.
Well, I guess I'm asking because the concern here would be that the rate is below the amount required to fund a mortgage. And the answer to that question would be to look at experiences on a wider perspective to see what real cap rates are in the rest of the world. Does this fit with the concept of finance? And like capitalization income is used to determine the viability for a loan, whether or not the rents can pay the loan.
We get sales returns. People are getting financing. They put down how much mortgage they got from what.
But that wasn't the question.
Credit
The
union.
question was this tested against the mortgage equity method?
The mortgage equity method is not used, but people are getting financing, so I'm not sure what you mean, why you can't get financing.
Are they getting financing on your workup? Could you take this workup?
They're getting financing, and they're telling us,
No,
they're
that's not-
reporting to us that I've seen.
Could you take this workup into a bank and have the bank approve a mortgage of 65, 70%?
Well, now we're getting
basis?
into the speculation of what a banker would do.
Well, okay, don't speculate on what a bank would do. In your opinion, would this be a valid indicator of value in the general market?
Yes.
Thank you, those are my questions.
Okay, Maurice, questions of the assessor?
Yes, you're using 4.0. What's the year of cutoff? Like, what's the going up, let's say, does it cut off at 1960 to a different rate? I'm trying to get a handle on what this is based on. Because I know you have periods that you apply rates.
We have periods, I don't have that in front of me, but this would be, I would just be guessing. I think the next period would be 1974.
You think so? And that would be how much then?
I don't have all the.
We probably have it here somewhere.
There, we have, the rates, the cap rates. See, it's not, they flow, there's not like a exact cap rate. It's based on building size and age and numerous factors. It's not just how it used to be, that they were all within a certain age. I know what you're getting at, but size is a factor too, and we found that these small buildings are selling with low cap rates. There's a broad market of prospective purchasers due to the price. Under $1 million, more people can afford them. That's a general way to put it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Cynthia?
Yeah, that was gonna be my question, was, is because with the age, this didn't seem to make a lot of sense, so that was gonna be my question, whether
It's size.
whether it was the
It's
size of the building.
as well,
Yeah, okay, that's all I have, then, thank you.
Okay, you can proceed, Matthew.
Now I'm getting into rebuttal evidence. So you can introduce the topic. One is on my page 24, and one is the handout I just made. My question concerned a cap rate so low that it wouldn't pass the mortgage equity test. The mortgage equity test is something that appraisers were taught to apply, always applied in the past, and it was basically determined the rate of return for an investor on his equity and the amount of money required to fund the mortgage. And if there wasn't enough money to fund the mortgage, then your cap rate was wrong. Now, on page 24, what we're showing is just with a typical interest rate of 4.5% and financing of 70%, the required NOI has to be 5.4% to fund your bank loan. And that's the mortgage equity test. What I was on this handout is, this is some of the information that went into making the Collier's cap rates that we list on page 19, and then and these have not been adjusted. Now, every Collier's office reports their cap rates differently. For example, I told you that Winnipeg adds closing costs to them, which drives our rates down, so they are lower than actual. Ontario takes all their cap rates and puts on a 5% vacancy on theirs, which may or may not be the case, but that's how they stabilize. What's interesting then is across Canada, the mean never drops below 5.4%. Now, there's some minor variations as far as funding and bank guarantees, loan guarantees from province to province, and what you can get. But there's an incredible consistency on that mean. And remember that these are the best rates. This is for product that we describe on our page 21. Concrete construction, well maintained, no deferred capital expense, ages between 0 to 15 years. This is the top quality. And we also put some US rates in too. And these are presented just to show you what our neighbors across the border. Now, they are impacted by different banking rules, but their investment market is stronger in Canada. And what bothers me about this is, why does our assessment department persist in thinking that these aggressive 4.8% rates actually exist? They don't exist. Now, that would mean that we're the best investment market in North America, and we're not. So it's basically, it comes down to an issue of their methodology of using old dated reports given to them instead of actually focusing on the date of sale and what was transpired between vendor and purchaser, whereas all of the rates I'm reporting do. The issues with this particular property, and incidentally, we made a mistake in our income workup, so I can't rely on it. I just discovered it, but it is higher than what the assessor has, but there's still an error in it. The issues with this property is it was renovated a few years ago, and I would always ask the question, why would anyone bother to renovate an 8-plex? There's just not enough upside on it. It's just too small to be an investment property. And when these small investment properties sell, there's usually an element of owner occupancy, with the standard being that someone buys it, lives in one suite, rents out the rest, it's got a mortgage covered. And that happens an awful lot. But once you renovate, you're driving that up to the investment market. And in the investment market, there's absolutely no interest in an 8-plex, because the risks on it are huge. With one vacancy, and for 1 month, is 1.2% over the year, just on 1 month vacancy. And so it's the unreliability of the income. If you have 3 turnovers for 1 month, your vacancy rate is 4%. And we're used to, to get a good cap rate, you need stability on your vacancy side. You need that magic 30 number. 8 is too small. That's my major reason for looking at 6.5. And we do, of course, I already pointed out a couple of rates earlier on properties that are good comparisons to at least consider to compare this to. I mentioned earlier that 26 and 45 Hargrave were renovated and sold at 6.62%. That would be a better investment than this property just for the size issue. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Questions, Mr. Lippy?
Is this building renovated?
Yes, I believe so, yes. In, so I think before 2013, yeah, it was around 2008 in that period, I think.
Okay. What's my other question?
Okay, Maurice, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Cynthia?
Just on your rebuttal piece here, these are all multifamily?
Yes.
That's,
Yeah, they're Collier sales.
yeah, thank you. Okay, that's all I had.
Okay, and I have questions, so thank you very much for your presentations, and we moved at a good pace today. So
Thank you.
that concludes today's hearing.